afternoon. My name is Natalia Kostus, and I work for IUCN, the Gender Office of IUCN. I'm going to talk about our capacity building on gender and climate change on the global and national level. IUCN, the Gender Office, is famous for our capacity building work. We actually developed over 70 sector-specific tools and trained more than 15,000 people over the years on all aspects of gender and environment. Before I get into climate change, I just wanted to highlight our recent project on energy, actually, and capacity building on energy. We did this project on gender in choosing implementation energy technologies. We had a workshop in Costa Rica that had some participants from Mesoamerica, Caribbean, and South America. It was implemented with ENERGIA. And it's based on this forthcoming publication called Guidelines on Renewable Energy Technologies for Women in Rural and Informal Urban Areas. And it's coming probably in the next couple of months. It's almost nearly finished. It's very useful because it really focuses on women's empowerment in terms of analyzing different renewable technologies and their advantages and disadvantages for different uses. It has aspects of analysis of energy use for cooking, lighting, heating, cooling, drying, and just different uses. And then lists different energies, renewable energy technologies that are available, benefits and disadvantages, and so women can make an informed choice. What it also does, it's also a handy tool for decision makers who are wanting to integrate gender into their energy projects, because it sort of provides guidelines for integrating gender. So it's a very hands-on publication. It includes different modules, very basic, so it can be adapted to training needs of different organizations. The modules, like the first module, focuses on very basics of gender and gender concepts. The second module focuses on very basic information on energy concepts. Then there's a module of what does it mean that the technology is most appropriate, for instance. And so it's very easily adaptable and very useful. So I'm going to share that publication with you when it comes up. I'm going to take the liberty of emailing everybody probably in a couple of months and sharing that with you. Okay. So now with the Global Gender and Climate Change Alliance, the GGCA, we've been implementing the GGCA capacity building programs IUCN has. But the GGCA was created in 2007 and includes over 38 UN and international organizations. It's funded by governments of Finland and Denmark. And the goal of GGCA is to ensure that climate change policies, decision-making, are gender responsive at different levels. And when we came into it in 2007, there was really no recognition of gender in climate change. People didn't know what the connection was. We were working a lot of with WeDo, and Monique, who had the presentation yesterday, we were talking with Monique, and we're remembering Poznan at COP14, where there was just no recognition of gender in the climate change policy tags and the governments. It was very tough for us. And so we achieved this paradigm shift over the years from 2007 to now. We started with knowledge development. We developed this training manual on gender and climate change, which was the first publication of that sort on gender and climate change. It's translated to 5 languages since, and also other publications on DRR, on RED, and on energy. We also did a lot of capacity building. We trained over 400 experts and 300 delegates from different countries. Advocacy work, that was the presentation of WeDo and Monique. We had the experts who we trained. A lot of them are here in this room today. Fairy, Lumampao from the Philippines, and other colleagues from ENERGIA. Produced a lot of interventions by governments, and also WeDo supports decision makers, women as decision makers in the negotiations. Now we're moving towards implementation. IUCN has been developing national policies for governments. We developed 7 strategies on gender and climate change, and over 25 countries requested our support to develop more. There is a real gap where the issue of gender and climate change has been recognized as important, but governments don't really know how to integrate it into their national policies. And so our challenge now is the national policy making and implementation. That's where we're moving towards. So I'm going to go through each of the steps and sort of provide you with more details really quickly. On the capacity building, knowledge products that I already mentioned on different issues. The Gender and Climate Change Manual, it's the first publication that was developed by IUCN as part of GGCA. How many of you are familiar with the Gender and Climate Change Manual? Can you raise your hand if you're familiar? Oh, okay, so a number of people, but it's available online, and we distributed 7,000 printed manuals, 4,000 CDs and memory drives. It's in 5 languages: English, French, Spanish, Arabic, and Portuguese. And it's available on 14,000 websites. It's very widely referenced and used by practitioners. It follows the Bali Action Plan, areas of adaptation, mitigation, technology, and finance. Energy is integrated throughout, actually, especially in mitigation, technology, and a little bit also in finance as well. And it also is a very practical tool because the modules can be separated from each other, and you can, it's comprehensive, just like our forthcoming publication on the renewable energy is. It includes exercises, it includes techniques for training, and just all of the materials and references one might need while developing a gender and climate change training. So we actually encourage the use of the manual in local and national projects, and anybody can use it as long as they accredit it to GGCA and contact us and let us know that they're using it and for what purpose, because we also keep track of that. So in capacity building achievements, we implemented 18 training of trainers that included over 500 experts from nearly 100 countries. And this created a pool of experts on gender and climate change who then went on to do a lot of the national level work and the policy work. Ferry was one of our trainers, a lot of trainers from ENERGIA that were included in that. And we also trained some government delegates. It was 250 government delegates from 110 countries. And the methodology was really successful. We used the training manual as the basis. And the methodology was such that the training of trainers was 3 days. And then the training of delegates was half day. And the trainers were comprehensively sort of trained of all the aspects of climate change and gender throughout the 3 days. But on the 3rd day, they prepared to conduct the training for the delegates. So they were actually all present for the delegates training for the half-day session. And that created a very interesting ratio of trainers to government delegates, which was almost 101. So there was a lot of gender and climate change experts in the room. And the government delegates had a lot of sort of support. And the training for delegates was very interactive. It wasn't like presentations at all. It was a workshop format. So there were sort of gender and climate change experts from the training of trainers present at each table. The tables were divided among different topics, and then it was a carousel methodology. So people would move from one table to the other every 15 or 30 minutes. And so it was a lot of exposure to information. But they came up with different strategies on gender and climate change within each of the expertise areas. So for instance, for climate change, gender and adaptation. And so the government delegates got to step out of their role. The climate change negotiations are very stressful usually. So they got to not speak on behalf of their countries, but in their personal capacity as experts on so it really increased their capacity. And that was the driving force for mainstreaming of gender considerations in the UNFCCC negotiations process, and also the driving force behind government representative asking for our support into developing gender and climate change national strategies and some of the regional strategies. I just wanted to put this slide in here because the women are still underrepresented in the decision-making on climate change. This is the share of women in delegations of parties to the UNFCCC negotiations. As you can see, it's quite low. And as members of delegations, it's about 30%, and as heads of delegations, it's about 15%. And the same is true on the national level. Women don't participate that much in climate change processes and climate change sort of decision-making on the national level. However, women's experiences and perspective are very important in climate change decision-making, and they bring important solutions as well as their knowledge on natural resources and on climate change adaptations is crucial. So it's important to promote spaces where women can sort of talk to decision makers on climate change. I'm going to move to the policy area, to our national and regional policies and plans on gender and climate change. We developed 7 strategies in Mozambique, Tanzania, Jordan, Egypt, Haiti, Central America, and the Arab states. And more than 25 countries have requested our support. And what we do is we develop situational analysis on the gender and climate change on the ground. We meet with communities and identify their priorities and needs, and then we do some technical trainings of government institutions on gender and climate change, and also we do trainings of the women's groups. What we found is there's a disconnect there's like a need for capacity building of different stakeholders. The national strategies include all those different stakeholders, the women's groups, ministries of environment, ministries of women, other ministries, local government authorities, community organizations, development organizations, national and local media, research institutes and academia, and private sector. And what we found is that women and women groups often lack capacity on climate change. So they have a lot of experience with typical women's issues such as violence against women and such, but on climate change, it's almost, it's very needed for them to understand the different processes so they can meaningfully participate. And it's very relevant to their work also on health and on financing and sort of across the work they're already doing, but they just need to have the capacity sort of to realize it and to benefit also from some of the financing mechanisms there, for example, in climate change. The Ministries of Environment, this process of national strategies is actually led by the Ministries of Environment. It's the ministers who are requesting our support officially for capacity building and for developing national gender and climate change strategies. And so the interest on the high level is very high. Sometimes there is a need to develop some capacity on gender within the ministries. And some of the actors from the ministries, from other ministries, like the Ministry of Energy or Ministry of Agriculture, also don't see the link sometimes. So it's very important for us to build the capacity first. But we actually develop the strategies. It's the participants themselves who develop it. We organize a workshop. It's a very fast process. It's about 3 days, and we divide them in groups on themes. It's the government leaders usually define the priorities for each of the countries of what they want to focus on. The national strategies create connections between different stakeholders. It's an ownership of the strategy because they develop it themselves. So it has very high implementation rates because of it, because they own it. And most NAPAs and national communications to the UNFCCC do not include gender dimension. And so now with the national climate change and gender policies, we see that governments are going to use that material and that gender analysis to include them in the national communications and some of the reporting mechanisms back to the UNFCCC. And for most cases, it's the first time that the different stakeholders are convened together. So it's also very important on the interpersonal relationship level because the Ministry of Women usually don't talk to the Ministry of Environment on climate change. So when the stakeholders sort of meet together and we develop the policy, it creates the interlinkages. And so the strategy is very concrete. It has objectives, indicators, goals, and different actions, and it's also divided on who is implementing what actions. And so they have to work together, or some of the strategies created some institutional processes within the countries of how they're going to continue to work together in the future. So I'm just going to give a brief example of Egypt. I'm almost finished. It's I put the whole objective in here, but it's the objective is basically to mainstream gender considerations into climate change initiatives and policies. And it focuses on 8 sectors: integrated coastal management, agriculture, water, tourism, health, energy, and transport. All of the strategies that we conducted include the energy sector in them. And also the ministries of energy are integrated. The most interesting, I'm going to almost conclude here, but the most interesting, and yet I continue talking, the most interesting aspect of the Egypt strategy very important. The most interesting aspect. Well, the most interesting aspect of the Egypt strategy was they actually included a very interesting transportation project of using the Nile River for transport, for public transport, and they included in their feasibility studies to have it run by women. So the water taxis operated by women. And with that, I'm going to conclude. Thank you very much.